Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Hunt, and on behalf of the Bullvine, I will be your moderator today. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's subject, which is using genomic testing strategies to accelerate your genetic progress. It's our pleasure to have David Erf with us as our presenter today. David comes from a successful registered brown Swiss herd, I believe in Minnesota, but then for the past 20 years, in the AI industry as well as in the animal genetic industry, and is currently a geneticist for Zoetis and very experienced and knowledgeable of the subject on how you can marry the use of genomic technology to maximize your revenues. With that, I will pass the presenting role over to David, and we will get started from there.
Well, I'd like to thank Andrew and everyone for joining me today for the third in our series of topics on genomic testing. And today's topic is using genomic testing strategies to accelerate genetic progress. As Andrew said, my name is David Erf, and I'm in the Dairy Technical Services group at Zoetis, so I get to travel a lot to farms across the U.S. and do some advising and consulting on how to maximize the use of genomic testing to accelerate progress in the herds. So today's topic is our third. You heard from Cheryl Marty on the introduction to genomics, and Dan Weigel did a great job on the proof that the technology works. So today's session, we're going to talk about genomic testing strategies, how to use that information to put a plan together to accelerate your progress. So what we're going to cover today, first we'll do a brief review of what we've learned, talk about who and when to test for genomics, and then get into the meat of the subject, which is the strategies to improve genetic progress, the importance of ranking your animals, and how to use the ranking with a solid strategy to maximize your genetic progress. So let's go through a little bit of review. This isn't going to be hard, but I just want to hit some points that have been made and the importance of those points. First of all is that genetics is kind of our hub in the wheel of our progress. We need our genetics to be at their best to get the best out of our great programs for nutrition, reproduction, milk quality, and herd health to get the most production out of the animals. If anything's lacking in this whole wheel, then we're not as strong as we could be. So if our calf care is lacking, then we're not going to get the most out of our genetics or our reproduction or our milk quality because our animal has been compromised. But if we've got everything running at top levels, then we're going to get maximum progress. So genetics kind of serves as a foundation, because if our genetic levels are low, then we're not getting the most out of our other areas. We've heard from both Cheryl and Dan how we can increase in reliability with genomic testing, and we can see an increase of over 40 points in reliability from a parent average to a genomic test. Parent average has served us well in the past, but now we have technology that gives us something that's better, so we can do better on predicting those young animals. As I like to say when I go on to a herd, it's a kind of our job interview for our young animals when we genomic test them. It's our ability to do that interview and find out which animal is going to be a good one and which one maybe not so good. We see that reliability also increases our confidence in what we're looking at. This is what I call the pyramid of knowledge about the animals. At the top, we have true breeding values, which today are not achievable. We get very close on some of the high-ranking bulls that have thousands and thousands of daughters out there. We get close to knowing their true breeding value. On the other end, we have random selection. So if I handed you a piece of paper that said I have heifers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I need you to pick one, you have no information other than those numbers. You have 0% reliability. If I show you 4 heifers and say they're 1, 2, 3, and 4, but that's all I do is just let you have a visual inspection, you can gain some information and have some low reliability on those animals, maybe see some confirmation traits that you want to focus on, or you see that are good or poor for that animal. You gain some reliability on that animal then. If we have a pedigree on the animal, we're, for a trait like net merit, we're close to 25% reliability on that information. Of course, that assumes that we're perfect in our parentage and the animal that we're working with, and we know through genomic testing that approximately 15% of the samples we take in at Zoetis are given the wrong parentage or the wrong sire on those animals. So using parent average, like I said before, has done us well, but we can do better, and that's with genomic testing. Genomic enhanced predicted transmitting abilities for a trait like net merit are close to 70%. It looks like where other breeds are a little lower reliability than the Holsteins, but right now we gain a lot of information with a genomic test. Genomics gives us more reliable and accurate information. It increases the reliability, and it allows us to make more effective progress in the traits we're looking for. And with this genomic test, we can manage animals differently and place more emphasis on those animals that rank higher and less of our resources in those lower ranking animals. In the past, we've taken those animals, those heifers especially, and treated them all the same. So we basically said we're investing the same amount in everyone and take a random roll of the dice and say, who's going to contribute to the next generation. This way we've got more knowledge about those animals that we should place more of our resources in, and those that we can get by placing less in. So you've looked at the information, and let's say you've decided to genomic test. So now you need to look at and say, what's the next step? Well, first we need to figure out who I'm going to sample and when should I sample them. And I always take the approach when I go out there is we need to sample the animals as close as we can to the time when you will use the information, but leave ourselves enough time to get the results and implement those results into a plan. So some of the common sampling times that I see when I'm out in the field are at birth, mostly for herds that they have limited calf facilities and want to make sure which animals they're going to invest in and raise, so they'll get those tests back and do some immediate culling off those tests, so they want them tested as soon as possible. Weaning time is another time where we see testing taking place. Those herds want to get those calves past those key areas like where they're more prone to pneumonia or scours, and go and test those animals at that time. Vaccination is another time where we see the genomic test being implemented, and at that time there's animals that are already being contained for other processes being vaccinated, and combining genomic testing sampling at that time seems to make sense for those herds and not handling the animals anymore. Pre-breeding time is a great time to test animals, especially for those herds where maybe they're making later culling decisions, or they're utilizing the information mostly for which animals they're going to let have influence in that next generation. So they'll test the animals in the pre-breeding time, and others may test the the pre-springing group of heifers to determine which animals they put into the milking herd. Just make sure when you're testing that you allow 3 to 5 weeks to receive results. Most of our testing gets back within 3 weeks, but we like to say 3 to 5 weeks to be safe, and then allow some time to get those results and put your plan in place after receiving the results. So if you're going to get your results and put the results through a mating program, you've got to leave yourself enough time to get that process done before you start breeding those animals. So when you have questions about sampling procedures and processes, there are some resources that you can access. You can visit the Zoetis Genetics website at www.clarify.com. You can also take advantage of the ability to combine processes and do two things at once with an RFID and DNA tissue sampling unit combination package, where you can tag the animal and collect a DNA sample from that animal at the same time. That's available through the USA Holstein Association. Those samples, if they're kept properly, can be good for many months after they're collected. So even if you're not testing the animal until after weaning, you can tag them at birth and save those DNA samples to send in at a later time, and that would also be an option out there. And to pick up, if there's any other questions about sampling procedures and processes or about genomic testing, Zoetis Genetics Customer Service or Zoetis or Holstein Association representatives can answer your questions. Also, the next part, we'll get into the meat of the subject, and that's the strategies to improve genetic progress. So this is what we're looking at with this topic. And when we get back our genomic test, you can see that a clarified test gives you back much information. Just like reading a bulletproof page, you get that same amount of information back. And it's quite a bit of traits to look at and reports. And looking through that, you can see a lot of comprehensive profile on your animal. And what we want to do is concentrate on what's in the left upper hand is those composite indexes or selection indexes. To get the animal ranking down to one number is let's put what emphasis we want on those animals for each trait and get them ranked so we can go accordingly. Now, when we look at getting those rankings done and doing some, making some progress and some impact on that next generation, we're looking at improving the efficiency and profitability by accelerating genetic progress. And our genetic progress formula per year is our accuracy times our selection intensity times genetic variation, and divide that by generation interval. And your chosen strategy that you choose determines how fast you can push the accelerator on that progress. When we look at it, genomic testing, we're definitely increasing the accuracy on our female population out there. We can get much more information at a young age on these animals and know which animals we want to emphasize and make sure that reproduce for that next generation or enter the milking herd. We also can increase our selection intensity, and that's done through better reproduction. 15 years ago, herds, we found very few herds that had extra heifers out there, but with the initiation of sex semen and the onset of OVSync programs and synchronization programs that are out there to improve reproduction, we're seeing many herds that have an excess of heifers. And if we can make an excess of heifers, we can genomic test and find those replacements that are worth our while to invest our resources in to enter the herd and become productive. So I would like you at this time, if you're looking at the screen, is to look at these 4 heifers that are in the headlocks here. These are 4 heifers that were randomly put in headlocks and were genomic tested. What I'd like you to do is pick out which animal you think is the best or the worst of that group, and just make a mental note to yourself which one they are. And we'll utilize that later on in the topic here. So we need to come up with an animal ranking, and that's the cornerstone for our action. We need to bring those animal rankings down into one number. I can't stress that enough. If you try to say, hey, I'm just going to get my results in, and I'm going to look through them and just pick them out by looking at a variety of traits, you're going to come back with many questions on animals. Well, she ranks well for this, she doesn't rank well for that, and you'll make it a lot harder than you have to. It's bring the animal rankings down to one number, and that's through utilizing a selection index or developing your own selection index for traits that are important to you if one of the selection indexes out there doesn't fit what you're doing. But many of you may ask what a selection index is. Well, it's a calculation that ranks animals and puts weight on emphasis on traits that you want to emphasize, and puts that are in accordance with your goals, and it ends up putting those animals on a scale, and we can rank them from best to worst. And the goal that we have with utilizing a selection index is to improve your genetic progress faster than the industry is for the traits you're selecting. Most herds that utilize genomic testing and implement a strategy that utilizes a selection index improve at a much, much faster rate. We see herds that are routinely making 2 to 3 times the progress for the traits they're emphasizing over what the whole industry is making. So what selection indexes are out there that are being used today? Well, if you genomic test through the Council of Dairy Cattle Breeding in the U.S., you get back 4 selection indexes on your genomic results. One of which is net merit dollars, which is frequently used out there, and it's a trait that balances many traits into a lifetime profit prediction. Cheese merit dollars is similar to net merit dollars, only it adds some emphasis on protein for use in the cheese manufacturing markets, or herds that are exclusively making cheese from their milk. They may utilize this index. Fluid merit dollars adds emphasis onto milk production and is mostly utilized in fluid markets. And the most recent addition to the merit formula indexes is the grazing merit formula. And it was introduced last December as an alternative for herds that do some intensive grazing, and it places a large emphasis on the reproductive needs of those herds that require seasonal breeding, seasonal calving. So a huge emphasis is placed on the reproductive traits for grazing merit. Selection indexes that are used today by, we also have breed association selection indexes. In the USA, we have Holstein has the Total Performance Index, or TPI, which I think most registered breeders are very familiar with. It's an index that's used around the world for animal ranking and is very prominent when we look at animals that are ranked around the world. It has many common traits with net merit formula, and therefore the relationship between those 2 indexes rankings are very high. The Jersey and Brown Swiss breeds also have selection indexes that they use, the JPI, the Jersey Performance Index, and the brown Swiss is the progressive performance ranking, the PPR. Those two place a little more emphasis on protein and are ones that are very popular in those breeds. Canada has the LPI, the Lifetime Profit Index, and recently introduced a Pro Dollars index that's a lifetime profit index for the Canadian rankings. So how do we use the rankings within strategies to put them into place? Well, first we have to look at where we sit with our herd, and we like to do all of this before we genomic test. I can't emphasize that enough. One of the first places we can use genomic testing results is to manage our herd replacement inventory. For herds that are expecting to make more heifers than they need, they can use genomic testing to help rank those animals and pick the ones that have the best opportunity to add to the profit level of the herd or the genetic progress level of the herd. So when you're doing this, we have to remember that when a herd is looking at improving their efficiency, the number one cost on dairy herds is the feed for the cows, but the number two cost is the replacement cost. And if we're consistently raising many more replacements than we need, we have to look at, are we raising the right ones? Are we bringing the right animals into the herd? So we're looking at right sizing that replacement level for the herd is to make an estimate on the number of animals we need, put a security margin in there so that if something goes wrong, we can still have enough animals, and then cull the rest. And this way we can remove the genetically inferior heifers. So this slide says culling heifers makes sense, and I can't agree more with that. We look on this chart here, and you can see in the blue we have animals that are born in 2012, and in 2013 we have net merit averages for animals born in 2013. We can see from one year to the next, the average moved 91 net merit dollars, which is great progress when the industry average is around 40 net merit dollars. So this herd is making great genetic progress. But the question is, can we do even better if we implement a culling strategy? By removing the bottom 15%, we increase the average PTA, that's the transmitting ability, what they'll pass on to the next generation, by $40. So that equates to $80 more on the breeding value, or what those animals will actually show over their lifetime for the next generation. Additional benefit for the following generations can also be found because we're identifying the better animals for reproduction. Another strategy is to generate more replacements from the genetically superior animals. And whether you're a herd that's looking at maintaining herd size or expanding, this is a common strategy that we like to see all herds use. It's basically, our goal is to choose and make more of the best animals that we get results on. We need to identify the replacement numbers needed and then choose a strategy for multiplying the top end. Are we going to use sex semen on the top end? Are we going to use ET or IVF procedures to multiply the top end? And then identify which animals are better recipients to hold those eggs on the bottom end, or which animals get lower value semen, or in some cases maybe we're going to use other strategies for those animals. So overall, when we're looking at implementing a strategy on a herd, there is not any one plan that works for the same for two herds. Every herd is different and needs to come up with their own strategy on culling levels or using ET or sex semen. There's no two herds I've come across where we put the same strategy together and put it into play at the same levels. So when we're looking at strategies, we like to work with our extremes. So on the left on this chart, we see we have our lower testing animals, and those are the ones that we can look at, and if we're got the ability to cull, we'd like to see those moved out. They're the ones that if you raise them up, they're not going to return your investment on the average for what you've put into them once they calve. They're going to be your problem animals on the most part. Not always, but they've got a higher chance of being that kind, either low production or animals that encounter hurdles along the way and just can't get over those hurdles that present themselves. On the other end, the top end, we've got the ET or IVF candidates there. If you want to concentrate on multiplying the top end, those are the ones that we identify at the top few percent of the herd when we put them on our rankings. In the green, we have our top half. In most herds, we look at those and say this is where we need to put our sex semen if we're going to invest in that technology, and make sure that those animals get a chance at putting a heifer calf into that next generation. When we talk on this, usually we're talking on the heifers when we're looking at using the top half for sex semen. A lot of herds that I help with, they utilize sex semen in various steps. They will place maybe the top quarter, get many more shots at sex semen, and as they approach that midline, they get fewer chances to conceive the sex semen. In the brown, the ones that are slightly below average are the animals that we can either use conventional semen on if they're heifers, or if we're into the mature dairy herd, these become animals that maybe we need them in the herd, but because we're using sex semen on other animals, maybe they're ones that are candidates to use beef semen on because we may not need any more heifer calves being born. Once you get your results, we also can't emphasize enough the utilization of mating programs. We now have verified correct parentage. So with that, we need to take advantage of managing the inbreeding and genetic conditions that our genomic testing has shown us and utilize those mating programs to do so. We also have a more reliable profile on that female's strengths and weaknesses. So if the parent average for a female showed us that she was a very high animal for milk, but our genomic profile says, no, she got the poorer genes for milk, then we've got a more accurate profile on how we need to mate that animal for the next generation of success. So let's stack the deck in our favor and use that genomic information in our mating programs to make the next generation even better. So it's a lifetime implementation of genomic data is what we're looking for. Is when we get the test back, we make the decision to keep, buy, or call animals. Look at it and say, get your genomic test results. Is this animal high enough to keep? Is she one I want to call? Or I got a genomic test on an animal that's available to me. Is it high enough to buy? You can make breeding decisions with this information. You pick the type of bull. You can determine the number of progeny you want to get out of an animal. Is she worth investing in ET, or is she an animal that's high enough that I'm going to use sex semen on her as a heifer? I'm going to continue using sex semen on her in her first or second lactations also if she ranks high enough, and also utilize the mating programs for those breeding decisions. And then we can also utilize this information for later life decisions. How many chances does she get before we go ahead and call her? When she hits one of those hurdles in life that come along, she gets an injury and it's compromised this lactation. And let's say you look at her and she's pregnant and you're determining, boy, do I keep her for the next lactation or not? We look and see, is she a higher genomic animal? Well, I've got a reason to keep her. I need to get an offspring out of her, and also, if she's going to get over this injury, she's probably going to be one of my better producers for the next lactation. If she's on the bottom end, is she one that, okay, she's come across one of those hurdles, do I have a lot to look forward to with her? And maybe she's one that you move out and make room for the heifer that's been genomic tested that you know is at a higher level. So in average, we can utilize these clarified results many times in an animal's lifetime. The more we utilize them, the better, and the more progress and profit we can make if we utilize these, because we can increase our genetic progress and our performance of our animals that we have. This chart just shows us the genetic progress that we can make. We can see here in the blue, we have the second lactation animals in a herd that have all been genomic tested. In the red, we have the first lactation animals, and we can see the progress that we've made. The green are our heifers, and the purple we have are our calves being born. Now we can see with this shaded area that the average of our first lactation animals is put on there, and we can see that the purple, we still have some of our calves being born that are below the average genetics of our first lactation animals. So that means that these calves that are in that shaded area, that if we raise them up and put them into the milking herd, they're going to be below average genetic animals. So they're ones that we can look at and say, are they worth raising up? Are they ones that are going to contribute to the genetics or improvement of the genetics in the herd? Likewise, on the top end, we can identify which animals are our genetically superior ones, so that if we're in an ET or IVF program, which animals are the ones that I need to utilize that way. And you can see that some of our heifers and calves are up there, but we'll also occasionally get a first or second lactation cow that's kind of an outlier that ranks very high, that we may want to continue letting have major influence in the genetics of the herd. So remember that picture that we showed you? Well, here's the results. And when I've presented this out in the field, the heifer that gets picked as the best was usually the white heifer. She kind of stands out a little bit type-wise, but she came out with the worst genomic test. And these numbers are real for these animals, and were from the UW-Madison dairy herd that we helped do genomic testing with. And you can see here that we've got quite the range with these 4 heifers that we put in the lockups. And we've got low end at 63 on the white heifer, and then the heifer standing to the left of her there is at 526 net merit. So now we have to figure out what we're going to do with these animals. So if we go through our decision processes that we talked about, if we can cull an animal, we can pick the low one to cull. So how does that affect the animals that we have? Well, the average genetics now, if we included the white heifer, we were at an average of 275 net merit dollars. If we cull her out, the average of the 3 that are left is at 345. So we increased $70 for the next generation. But for those animals that we bring in, if we brought just the 3 in, their genetic level will be $140 per animal higher than if we had all 4 in there. We can also do some other things. We can look at the top animal and say, hey, we want to use her as a donor mother. The next highest one we want to use sex semen on because she ranks in the top half of the herd, and we want to make sure she has a heifer. And maybe we utilize the 209 net merit dollar heifer as a recipient for the second heifer there. And if we do those things, we can then see the average genetics passed on to the offspring is at 451 net merit dollars versus if we just bred all four of those heifers at 275. So it'd be a 176 net merit dollar increase for the next generation over just randomly breeding those animals. And this is not to be interpreted as a strategy per se here. It's just what the opportunities are out there to increase the genetic level of your herd. So, in summary, it's a lifetime of decisions that we can make. It's about which replacements do we keep, do we sell, which ones do we buy? Lifetime breeding decisions. Who bears more heifers? Which heifers get the chance to get utilized for sourcing the next generation? Which cows still included in reproduction for that next generation? Which animals maybe are lower priority? We can make more correct mating decisions for inbreeding, genetic conditions, recessives or haplotypes, and we can prioritize corrective matings for those animals. And then we can also manage our adult cow herd for cull cow decisions, which animals have higher priority there. And I can't emphasize it enough, it's important to have a clear strategy. Develop a strategy before you test. How will I use the results once I get them back? This is not something to be done after you get results. We need it done before you get the results so we can put those results into action and use that to improve your herd. And when you're developing a strategy, come up with an index to rank the animals with one number. There's lots of selection indexes out there. Find the one that suits you the best, and if there are reasons that you need to develop your own, that can be done. But I like to compare those customized selection indexes with what the industry has, because sometimes we find out we're selecting for the same thing and we're going through a lot of hoops to get a very similar ranking. Next, make sure you utilize your results. Testing and doing nothing with it is expensive information. We need to do something with the results that we get. So I'd like everybody that Genomics tests to kind of, they become their own compliance monitor to make sure that they're going ahead and doing those decision points that they kind of put out in their strategy. Is, am I removing my excess heifers? Am I utilizing mating programs to utilize this information? Can I improve my reproduction program so I can make more heifers and be more choosy and increase my genetic progress that way? Am I utilizing my information to kind of multiply my best genetics, or at least reproduce them? Can I extend this this philosophy to more age groups? Normally I see 1/4 of the 2-year-olds are still higher than the average heifers in most herds, and are a place where we can make additional progress in genetic levels if we utilize them with some sex semen or prioritize them to be bred to better bulls. Are you in expansion mode? You can still utilize genomic testing. A lot of herds are looking at expanding and want to grow bigger, but it's best to grow bigger the smart way, is to make sure that the animals you're keeping are the ones that are going to be the most profitable for you. So even herds that are looking to expand and holding on to heifers, we encourage them to find even a small percentage of the heifers on the low end that are more likely to be problem animals that are not going to return a profit to the dairy, and call those out. Herds that are expanding just need to make sure they're making enough heifers that they can still be somewhat selective on that bottom end and call out the bottom testing ones and make that genetic progress that still leaves their herd making more genetic progress than the average herd out there. So that's the conclusion of my talk, and the next session that's coming up will be from Cheryl Marty, and we'll be discussing the economics of genomics. And so we want you to discover the opportunity on an economic basis that genomic testing offers. So with that, I'll turn it back to Andrew, and we'll field some questions.
So the first question is there a minimum level of culling necessary in order to accelerate the genetic gain in my herd?
Well, that's a good question. I like it when herds are interested in culling because we can eliminate those low animals. What's the magic number for culling? Well, it depends on your situation. I like to see herds that cull at least 10 to 15% of their heifers. That seems to be, to me, the magic numbers that I look at. If we start getting herds, and I've been in them where they have an excess of 30-35% heifers, it's, to me, is a lot of wasted resources in raising those calves up, and they're breeding animals that have little chance to make some of the top end for the indexes they're looking for. So I like to see 10 to 15 to 20% excess heifers to cull. And if you get into expansion mode where you're looking at growing the herd, I still like to see the bottom 5% get culled in those situations so we can eliminate that bottom end and concentrate a little more on making sure the animals we've got left are going to be profitable ones.
Okay, and the next question is, are there mating programs that take genomic inbreeding consideration?
That's a kind of a fluid question there. Genomic inbreeding, there's programs that look at right now that are out there that will take the corrected parentage and use it for many generations if you've got enough genomic testing to have animals verified for a few generations. There are some mating programs that are looking at mating on the genomic level, but they're still being developed out there. But right now, what I would do for my animals is utilize a mating program that's going to take into account those relationships out there and minimize those future inbreeding levels on the individual basis.
Okay. And then another question is, do you have any stats comparing the rate of genetic gain in their genomic testing versus herds that do not test?
That will be a topic for our future webinars. We've got a lot of those kind of stats out there where we compare herds to the industry averages, and you'll get to see those in the next webinars that we do to kind of show you how we can track results over time so that you can kind of benchmark your progress to see how am I doing and how is the industry doing, because that's the getting down to the nitty-gritty is my strategy working for me? How well am I doing? Can I do better? And that's a great question that way, and that's something I always like to hear from herds is, how am I doing? It's putting it on a grade card or report card, and we all know that farmers are very competitive, and this way they can see their progress over time and see the value that genomic testing has put into their herd so they can make more progress.
Okay. What methods can we use when culling is not an option? So how can we leverage it when culling is not an option?
Well, if culling is not an option at all, we can definitely utilize genomic results to make sure which animals we need to invest in to make that next generation. Also, it kind of helps you to identify which animals might be more problem animals down the line so that you may see those coming and at least know uh, what's my worthwhile investment returns if I treat this animal and get her better for the future. It's about making that next generation then is what if culling's not an option. Uh, that's the main part of your progress is which animals do I designate for creating that next generation. And it also, if culling is not an option now, you might put together a strategy for using sex semen so culling might become an option later on down the line too.
Okay. And what are the must-have elements that should be part of our breeding strategy?
Well, the must-have elements to me are number one is the ranking of the animal uh, so that we can prioritize the animals in a strategy. We need to identify with any strategy which animals are we prioritizing for that next generation. So we're making that next generation better. Which animals are on the lower end of my ranking that I put less priority on or less investment in. You'll see some information down the line that the average animal on most herds has to be most of the way through their second lactation to become profitable animals. So the strategy that we put in play is to get these animals to last longer, to be more productive so that they become profit contributors to the farm. So the strategy is all about that, is raising animals that are going to increase our genetic progress and make us more profitable down the line and minimize the influence of those that have less capabilities of doing that.
Okay. Next question is, would you recommend using sex semen on the top 15% of my herd and culling the bottom 15%?
If that herd has the ability to do that, that would be great. I think sex semen on the in most herds I go to, we try to stepwise use it. Is maybe the top quarter of their heifers get uh, 3 chances at sex semen before they move to conventional, and then the next quarter might get 1 chance, and so on. And with that, we've got a lot of tools that we can use to kind of show them how many heifers are you going to make for the next generation so that they know how many they can afford to cull at that point. And we've got tools that look at their current inventories and say, do you have enough, with a security margin in there too? So, because the last thing I want to do is to go into a herd and have them cull the bottom 15%, and then 2 years down the road they're looking at empty stalls and going, why did I cull animals when I don't have enough to fill up? And so we want to make sure that we're right-sizing their replacement herd too.
Okay. And the next question, what are the most important things you'd look for in a mating program?
Right now, to me, the biggest benefit of a mating program is managing inbreeding and making sure that they're looking at that animal and finding the mate that keeps the inbreeding level the lowest that they possibly can. Uh, Mating programs are great for that. I can't emphasize that enough, to work with your preferred provider of a mating program and utilize the genomic information to go in there. To me, it's managing inbreeding is the biggest thing, because we know that with genomics, we've seen an increase in the inbreeding levels in all the dairy breeds, and mating programs will help us manage that inbreeding level to make sure we're not making matings that are going to create some problems down the line.
Cool. And then we've had another one come in. Are we not going backwards by using sex semen if a heifer is higher than the bulls that we can get?
I very much appreciate that question. It's a very good one. When we're using sex semen, yes, we like to use the best bulls we can get for sex semen that we can get for mating those heifers. If we're dropping too much on sex semen, we have to look at are we getting enough value? But in most cases where we're into herds, if the bull is 20 or 30 net merit dollars below a conventional semen bull and I can get sex semen, I'd use the bull that's 20 or 30 net merit dollars lower with sex semen on a commercial basis, because I know I'm going to get a heifer calf out of the right animal, where conventional semen I'm taking that 50-50 coin flip on whether she's going to give me a heifer calf or not. But if that gap gets to be too big, yes, we have to look at it and say, am I decreasing my genetic progress? So I got to stress that when you're using sex semen, is try to keep your genetic levels as high as you can.
Well, that I want to thank everyone for attending today. Especially want to thank David. I think you did a great job. Appreciate that. I think you answered a lot of questions that we had been looking for. If people had any other questions, is there a best method to reach out to you? If they had any further questions?
First of all, I want to say thank you, Andrew, for putting this on and doing all the setup and all the coordination that you do. You do a great job with it. And if anyone has any further questions for me, feel free to reach me by email. And my email is david.erf@zoetis.com. And feel free to email me with any questions or comments or anything else.
And thank you, David. We do enjoy putting on these sessions. They have been very well received, and we can enjoy. We got quite a few more to come. I think there's 3 or 4 more to come in this series, and we do appreciate everyone for attending today.